34. Jason survived. Barely. Later his friends explained that they hadn't seen him fall from the sky until the last second. There was no time for Frank to turn into an eagle and catch him. No time for formulate of rescue plans. Only Piper's quick thinking and jumping had saved his life. She had yelled, "Wake up!" with so much force that Jason felt like he'd been hit with a defibrillator paddles with a millisecond to spare. He'd summoned the wind and avoided becoming a floating patch of demigod grease on the surface of the Adriatic. Back on board, he had pulled Leo aside and suggested a course correction. Fortunately, Leo trusted him enough not to ask why. "Good vacation spot," Leo grinned. "But hey, you're the boss." Now, sitting with his friends in the mess hall, Jason felt so awake he doubted he would sleep for a week. His hands were jittery. He couldn't stop tapping his feet. He guessed that this was how Leo felt all the time, except that Leo had a sense of humour. After what Jason had seen in his dreams, he didn't feel much like joking. While they ate lunch, Jason reported on his mid-air vision. His friends were quiet long enough for Coach Hedge to finish a peanut butter and banana sandwich, along with the ceramic plate. Why did Coach Hedge eat a plate? He must be a greedy gut. Please subscribe to, okay? Haven't had so much subscribers. Haven't had any subscribers, actually. The ship creaked as it sailed through the Adriatic. Its raining oars still out of alignment from the giant turtle attack. Every once in a while, Festus the figurehead creaked and squeaked through the speakers, reporting the autopilot status in that weird machine language that only Leo could understand. "A note from Annabeth." Piper shook her head in amaze. In amazement. I don't see how that's possible, but if it is, she's alive, Leo said. "Thank the gods and pass the hot sauce." Frank frowned. "What does that mean?" Leo wiped the chip crumbs off his feet. "It means pass the hot sauce, Sang. I'm still hungry." Frank stood over the jar of salsa. "I can't believe Rihanna would try to find us. It's taboo coming up to the ancient land. She'll be tripped over a freighter ship if she lives," Hazel said. "It was hard enough for us to make it this far with several demigods and a warship." "And me," coaches Belch. "Don't forget Cupcake." "And you got the satire advantage." Jason had to smile. Coaches was pretty ridiculous, but Jason was glad he'd come along. He thought about the satyrs he'd seen in his dreams. Grover Underwood. He couldn't imagine a satyr more different from Coach Hedge, but they both seemed brave in their own way. It made Jason wonder about the Fawns back at Camp Jupiter, whether they could be like that if the Roman demigods expected more from them. Another thing to add to his list. He hadn't realized that he had one until a moment, but ever since leaving Camp Half-Blood, he'd been thinking of ways to make Camp Jupiter more Greek. He had grown up at Camp Jupiter. He'd done well there, but he always had been a little unconventional. He'd chaffed under the rules. He'd joined the 5th cohort because everyone told him not to. They warned him it was the worst unit, so he thought, fine, I'll make it best. Once he'd become traitor, he'd campaigned to rename the Legion. The last Legion rather than 12th Legion, symbolizing New South Wales. The idea had already caused a mutiny of but now that he's so unequally to be that camera, but might be happy. Told him more about himself. If he's a white war there, I would have to come to the British, the changes, but it's and Leo. He guessed that made him a pretty terrible leader. Jason, Leo asked. I'll go too to Jason. Come in. He realized his friends were looking at him expectantly. They needed reassurance whether or not he made it back to New Rome after the war. Jason had to step up now and act like a predator. Yeah, sorry, he touched the grooves that Siren the bandit had cut in his hair. Crossing the Atlantic is a hard journey. No doubt, but I'd never bet against Rena. If anyone can make it, she will. Piper circled her spoon through her soup. Jason was still a little nervous about getting jealous of Rena. But when she looked up and gave him a dry smile, that seemed more teasing than insecure. Well, I'd love to see Rena again, she said. But how was she supposed to find us? Frank raised his hand. Can't you send her an iris message? They're not working very well, Coach Ed put in. Horrible reception. Every night I swear I could kick that rainbow goddess. He faltered. His face turned bright red. Coach, Leo grinned. You have been calling every night, you old goat. No one had snapped. Nothing. It just meant he means we've already tried, Aislinn grunted. And the coach gave her a grateful look. Some magic is interfering. Maybe gayer. Contacting the Romans is even harder. I think they're shielding themselves. Jason looked from Hazel to the coach, wondering what was going on with the satyr and how Hazel knew about it. Now that Jason thought about it, the coach hasn't mentioned his cloud nymph girlfriend Melly in a long time. Frank drummed his fingers on the table. I don't suppose Rena has a cell phone. Never mind. She'd probably have bad reception on a Pegasus flying over the Atlantic. Jason thought about the Argo 2's journey across the ocean. The ocean What is the ocean? Jason thought about the Argo 2's journey across the ocean. There you go. The dozens of encounters that had nearly killed them. Thinking about Rena made the journey alone. He couldn't decide whether it was terrifying or inspiring. She'll find us, he said. She mentioned something in the dream. She expected me to go to a certain place or on our way to the House of Hades. I'd forgotten about it, actually. But she's right. It's a place I need to visit. Piper leaned towards him, his caramel braid falling over her shoulder. Her multicolored eyes made it hard for him to think straight. And where is this place, he asked. A town called Split. Split, he sounds really good, like blooming honeysuckle. Yeah, Jason wondered if Piper was working some sort of appropriate magic on him. Like maybe every time he mentioned Rena's name, he would befuddle him so much he wouldn't think about anything but Piper. He supposed that it wasn't the worst sort of revenge. In fact, we should be getting close, Leo. Leo punched the intercom button. How was it going up there, buddy? Festus, the figurehead, creaked and steamed. He says maybe 10 minutes to the harbour, Leo reported. Though I still don't get why you want me to go to Croatia, especially a town called Split. I mean, you name your city Split. You've got to figure it's a warning to Split. Kind of name your city Get Out. Wait, Hazel said. Why are we going to Croatia? Jason noticed the other were reluctant to meet her eyes, since her trick would miss against Syrian the bandit. Even Jason felt like a little nervous around her. She knew that wasn't fair to Hazel. It was hard enough being a child of Pluto, but she pulled off some serious magic on that cliff. And afterwards, according to Hazel, Pluto himself had appeared to her. There was something Romans typically called a bad omen. Leo pushed his chips and hot sauce aside. Well, technically, we've been in Croatian territory for the past day or so. All that coastline we've been sailing past is it. But I guess back in the Roman times, it was called, what did you say, Jason? Bodaciaka? Dalmatia, Nico said, making Jason jump. Holy Romulus! Jason wished he could put a bell around Nico D'Anglo's neck to remind him the guy was there. Nico had this disturbing habit of standing silently in the corner, blending into the shadows. He stepped forward, his dark eyes fixed on Jason. Since they'd rescued him from the bronze jar in Rome, Nico had slept very little and eaten even less, and as if he was still subsisting on those emergency pomegranate seeds from the underworld. He minded Jason a little too much of flesh-eating Geralt since he'd fought in San Bernardo. Coach had managed. Croatia used to be Croatia used to be Dalmatia, Nico said, a major Roman province. You want to visit Diocletian's palace, don't you? Coach has managed another heroic belch. Whose palace? And is Dalmatia where those Dalmatian dogs come from? That 101 Dalmatians movie? I still have nightmares. Frank scratched his head. Why would you have nightmares about that? Coach Head looked like he was about to launch into a major speech about the evils of cartoon Dalmatians, but Jason decided he didn't want to know. Nico is right, he said. I need to go to Diocletian's palace. His Rowena will go first because she knows I would go there. Piper raised an eyebrow. Why will Rowena think that? Because you've always had a fascination with Croatian culture. Jason set out his uneaten sandwich. It was hard to talk about his life before Juno wiped his memory. His years at Camp Jupiter made it up like a movie he'd acted in decades. Camp Jupiter seemed made up like a movie he'd acted in decades before. William and I used to talk about Diocletian, he said. We both kind of idolized the guy as a leader. We talked about how we'd like to visit Diocletian's palace. Of course we knew that was impossible. No one could travel to the ancient lands. But still, we made this pact that if we ever did, that's where we'd go. Diocletian. Leo considered the name, then shook his head. I got nothing. Why was he so important? Frank looked offended. He was the last great pagan emperor. Leo rolled his eyes. Why am I not surprised you know that, then? Why wouldn't I? He was the last one who'd worshipped the Olympian gods before Constantine came along and adopted Christianity. Hazel nodded. I remember something about that. The nuns at St. Agnes taught us that Diocletian was a huge villain, right along with Nero and Caligula. No. Oh, there you go. Why wouldn't... He was a total villain, Jason said. Yeah, he persecuted Christians, but otherwise he was a good ruler. He worked his way up but from nothing but by joining the Legion. His parents were former slaves, or at least his mum was. Then we got to know he was a son of Jupiter. The last time he got to rule Rome, he was also the first emperor to ever to retire, like peaceful, and give up his power. He was from Dalmatia, so he moved back there and built a retirement palace. The town of Split grew up around. Sorry about that. Camp Jupiter seemed the town of Split grew up and around. He faltered when he looked at Leo, who was taking notes with an air pencil. "Go on, Professor Grace," he said, wide-eyed. I want to get an A on the test." "Shut up, Leo." Piper sipped another spoonful of soup. "So why is Diocletian's palace so special?" Nico leaned over and plucked a grape. Probably that was the guy's entire diet for the day. It's said to be haunted by it seemed to be where was it? It seemed to be on It's said to be haunted by the ghost of Diocletian, who was the son of Jupiter, like me, Jason said. His tomb was destroyed centuries ago, but Raina and I used to wonder if we could find Diocletian's ghost and ask where he was buried. Well, according to legend, his scepter was buried with him. Nigel gave a thin, creepy smile. "Ah, that legend." "What legend?" Hazel said. Nigel turned to his sister. Supposedly, Diocletian's scepter could summon gods of Roman legends. Any of them would worship the old gods. Leo whispered, "Okay, now I'm interested. Be nice to have a boot-kicking army of pagan zombies on our side when we enter the House of Hades." "Not sure I would have put it that way," Jason muttered. "But yeah, we don't have much time," Frank warned. "It's already July 9th. We have to get to Epirus. Close the doors of death, which are guarded," Hazel murmured, "by a smoky giant and a sorceress who once..." He hesitated. "Well, I'm not sure, but according to Pluto, she plans to build her domain. Whatever that means, it's bad enough that my dad felt like warning me personally." Frank grunted and if we survive all that, we still have to find out where the giants are waking Gaia and get them before the rest of Horus. Besides, the longer Percy and Anubis are into Taurus." "I know," Jason said. "We won't take long in Split. But looking for the scepter is worth a try. We're still at the palace. I can leave a message for Raina, letting her know the route we're taking for Epirus." Nico nodded. The scepter of Diocletian could make a huge difference. "You'll need my help." Jason tried not to show his discomfort, but his skin prickled at the thought of going anywhere with Nico D'Angelo. Piper had shared some disturbing stories about Nico. His loyalties weren't always clear. He spent more time with the Palace of Hades. Maybe Nico had made up for that by helping the Greeks against the Titans. But still, Piper squeezed his hand. "Hey, sounds fun, I'll go too." Jason wanted to yell, "Thank the gods!" But Nico shook his head. "You can't, Piper. It should only be Jason and me. The Diocletian's ghost might appear for a son of Jupiter, but any uncommon demigods might most likely spook him. And I'm the only one who can talk to his spirit. Even Hazel wouldn't be able to do that." Nico's eyes held a gleam of challenge. He seemed curious as to whether or not Jason would protest. The ship's bell sounded, Festus creaked, and whirred over the loudspeaker. We've arrived," Leo announced. Time to split." Frank ground. "Can we leave Voldex in Croatia?" Jason stood. "Frank, you're in charge of defending the ship. Leo, you've got repairs to do. The rest of you help out wherever you can. Nico and I," he faced the son of Hades, "we have a ghost to find." Chapter 35. Jason first saw the angel at the ice cream cart. The Argo 2 had anchored in the bay along with 6 or 7 cruise ships. As usual, the mortals didn't pay the any attention. But just to be safe, Jason and Nico hopped on a skiff from one of the tourist boats, so they would look like a part of the crowd. When they came ashore, at first glance, Split seemed like a cool place, curving around the harbour with a long esplanade lined with palm trees and the sidewalk cafes. European teenagers were hanging out, speaking a dozen different languages and enjoying the sunny afternoon. The air smelled of grilled meat and fresh cut flowers. Beyond the main boulevard, the city hodgepodge of medieval castle hodgepodge. The city was a hodgepodge of medieval castle towers, Roman walls, limestone townhouses with red-tiled roofs, and modern modern office buildings, all crammed together in distant green hills, marched towards a mountain ridge which made Jason a little nervous. He kept glancing at the rocky escarpment, expecting the face of Gay to appear in its shadows. Nico and he were wandering along the esplanade when Jason spotted a guy with wings buying an ice cream bar for a street cart. The vendor lady looked bored as she counted the guy's change. Tourists navigated around the angel's huge wings without a second glance. Jason nudged Nico. Are you seeing this? Yeah, Nico agreed. Maybe we should buy some ice cream? As they made their way towards the street cart, Jason worried that this winged dude might be a son of Boreas, North Wind. At his side, the angel carried the same kind of jagged bronze sword the Boreas had, and Jason's last encounter with them hadn't gone so well. But this guy seemed more chill than chilly. He wore a red tank top, Bermuda shorts, and Horeg sandals. His wings were a combination of russet colours, like a bantam rooster or a lazy sunset. He had a deep tan and black hair, almost as curly as Leo's. He's not a returned spirit like the Nico muttered, or a creature of the underworld. No, Jason agreed. I doubt they would eat chocolate covered with ice cream bars. So what is he, Nico wondered. They got within 30 feet, and the winged dude looked directly at them. He smiled, gestured over his shoulder with his ice cream bar, and dissolved into the air. Jason couldn't exactly see him, but he had enough experience controlling the wind that he could track the angel's path. A warm wisp of red and gold zipping across the street, spiraling down from the sidewalk and blowing postcards from the carousels in front of the tourist shops. The wind headed towards the end of the promenade, where a big fortress-like structure loomed. I'm betting that's the PlayStation said. Come on. After a 2 millionaire Diocletian's palace was still impressive. The outer wall was only a pink granite shell with crumbling columns and arched windows open to the sky, but it was mostly intact, a quarter of a mile long and distant of 80 feet tall, dwarfing the modern shops and houses that huddled beneath it. Jason imaged what the palace must have looked like when it was newly built, with the imperial guards walking the ramparts and the golden eagles of Rome glinting on the parapets. The wind angel, or whatever he was, whistled in and out of the pink granite windows that disappeared on the other side. Jason scanned the palace's facade for an entrance. only one he saw was several blocks away with tourists lined up to buy tickets. No time for that. We've got to catch him, Jason said. Hold on, but... Jason grabbed Nico and lifted them both into the air. Nico made a muffled sound of protest as they soared over the walls and in the courtyard where more tourists were milling around, taking pictures. A little kid did a double take when they landed. Then his eyes glazed over and shook his head like he was dismissing a juice box induced hallucination. No one else paid them any attention. On the left side of the courtyard stood a line of columns holding up weathered grey arches. On the right side was a white marble building with rows of tall windows. The peristyle, Nico said. This was the entrance to Diocletian's private residence. He scowled at Jason and, please, I don't like being touched. Don't ever grab me again. Jason's shoulder blades tensed. He thought he heard the undertone of a threat, like, unless you want to get a Stydian, sword up your nose. Okay, sorry. How do you know what this place is called? Nico scanned the atrium. He focused on some steps in the far corner leading down. I've been here before. His eyes were as dark as his blade. With my mother and Bianca. A weekend trip from Venice. I was maybe 6. That was when? The 1930s. 38 or so, Nico said absently. Why do you care? Do you see that winged guy anywhere? No, Jason was still trying to wrap his mind around Nico's past. Jason always tried to build a good relationship with the people on his team. He learned the hard way that if somebody was going to have your back in a fight, it was better if you found some common ground and trusted each other. But Nico wasn't easy to figure out. I can't imagine how weird it must be coming from another time. No, you can't. Nico stared at the stone floor. He took a deep breath. Look, I don't like talking about it, honestly. I think Hazel has it worse. She remembers more about when she was young. She had to come back from the dead and adjust to the modern world. Me and Bianca were stuck at the Lotus Hotel. Time passed so quickly in a weird way that made the transition easier. Percy told me about this place, Jason said, 70 years. But it felt like only a month. Nico clenched his fist until his fingers turned white. Yeah, I'm sure Percy told you all about me. His voice was heavy with bitterness. More than Jason could understand. He knew that Nico had blamed Percy for getting his sister Bianca killed, but they'd supposed past that at least, according to Percy. Piper had also mentioned a rumor that Nico had a crush on Annabeth. Maybe that was part of it. Still, Jason didn't get why Nico pushed people away, why he never spent much time at either camp, why he preferred the dead to be living. He really didn't get why Nico had promised to lead the Argo 2 to Epirus if he hated Percy Jackson so much. Nico's eyes swept the windows above them. Roman dead are everywhere here. Lemurus, they're watching. They're angry. At first, Jason's hand went to his sword. At everything. Nico pointed to a small stone building on the west end of the courtyard. That used to be the temple to Jupiter. The Christians changed it to a baptistry. The Roman ghosts don't like that. Jason stared at the dark doorway. He'd never met Jupiter, but he thought of his father as a living person, the guy who'd fallen in love with his mum. Of course, he knew his dad was immortal, but somehow the full meaning of that had never really sunk in until now, as he stared at the doorway Romans had walked through thousands of years ago to worship his dad. The idea gave Jason a splitting headache. And over there, Nico pointed east to the hexagonal building ringed with freestanding columns. That was the mausoleum of the emperor. His tomb isn't there anymore, Jason guessed. Not for centuries, Nico said. When the empire collapsed, the building was turned into a Christian cathedral. Jason swallowed. So if Diocletian's ghost is still around here, he's probably not so happy. The wind rustled, pushing leaves and food wrappers across the pestle. The wind rushed, pushing leaves and food wrappers across the peristyle. In the corner of his eye, Jason caught a glimpse of movement, a blur of red and gold. When he turned, a single rust-coloured feather was settling on the steps that led down. That way, Jason pointed. The winged guy. Where do you think those stairs lead? Michael drew his sword. His smile was even more unsettling than his scowl. Underground, he said. My favourite place. Underground was not Jason's favourite place. Ever since his trip beneath Rome with Piper and Percy, fighting those twin giants in Hypo Gym under the Colosseum, most of his nightmares had been about basements, trapdoors, and large hamster wheels. Having Nico along was not reassuring. His staggered iron blade seemed to make the shadows even gloomier, as if the infernal metal was drawing the light and heat out of the air. They crept through a vast cellar with thick support columns, holding up a vaulted ceiling. The limestone blocks were so old they had fused together from centuries of moisture, making the place almost like a naturally formed cave. Now that all his adventures down here, obviously they were smarter than demigods. 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 Why do I keep saying that? Jason drew his full gladius. Jason drew his gladius. They made their way under the lower archways, their steps echoing on the stone floor. Bared windows lined the top of one wall, facing the street level. But that just made the cellar feel more claustrophobic. The shafts of sunlight looked like slanted prison bars, swirling with ancient dust. Jason passed a support beam, looked into his left, and almost had a heart attack. Staring right at him was a marble bust of Diocletian. His limestone face glowed with disapproval. Jason steadied his breathing. It seemed like a good place to leave a note he'd written for Rayla, telling her of their route to Epirus. It was away from the crowds. But he trusted Rihanna would find it. She had the instincts of a hunter. He slipped the note between the bust and its pedestal and stepped back. Diocletian's marble eyes made him jumpy. Jason couldn't help thinking of Termus, the talking statue god, back at New Rome. He hoped Diocletian wouldn't bark at him or suddenly burst into a song. Hello! Before Jason could register that voice had come the voice had come from somewhere else, he sliced off the emperor's head. The bust toppled and shattered against the floor. That wasn't very nice, said the voice behind him. Jason turned. The wingman from the ice cream stand was leaning against the nearby column, catching and tossing a small bronze hoop in the air. At his feet, sat a wicker picnic basket full of fruit. I mean, the man said, what did Dioclety ever do to you? Yes, whirled around Jason's feet. The shards of marble gathered into a miniature tornado, so I battered the pedestal and reassembled into a complete bust. The note still tucked underneath. Jason noticed what? It was an accident. You startled me. The winged dude chuckled. Jason Grace. The west wind has called many things. Warm, gently, life-living, and devilishly handsome. But I've never been called startling. I leave that cross behavior to my gusty breath hen in the north. Michael inched backwards. The west wind? You mean your Favonius? Jason realized. God of the west wind. Favonius smiled and bowed, obviously pleased to be recognized. You call me by my Roman name, and certainly of Dephorius. If you're Greek, I'm not hung up about it. And Michael looked pretty hung up about it. Why aren't you Greek and Roman sides in conflict like the other gods? I have this occasional headaches, Favonius shrugged. Some mornings I wake up in a Greek Triton when I'm sure I went to sleep in my sport pajamas. But mostly the war doesn't bother me. I'm a mighty god, you know. Never really been much in the limelight. The to and fro battles among you demigods don't affect me as greatly. So, Jason wasn't quite sure whether to sheath his sword. What are you doing here? Several things, Favonius said. Hanging out with my basket of fruit. I always carry a basket of fruit. Would you like a pear? I'm good, thanks. Let's see, earlier I was eating ice cream. Right now I'm tossing the quiet ring. Favonius spun the one soup on his index finger. Jason had no idea what a quiet was, but he tried to stay focused. I mean, why did you appear to us? Why did you lead us to the cellar? Oh, Favonius nodded. The sarcophagus of Dioclety. Yes, this was his final resting place. The Christians moved it out of the mausoleum. Then some barbarians destroyed the coffin. I just wanted to show you. He spread his hand sadly. That what you're looking for isn't in here. My master has taken it. Your master? Jason had a flashback to a floating place above in Pike Peaks in corridor where he visited and barely survived. The studio of crazy weatherman who claimed he was the god of all winds. Please tell me your master isn't Aeolus? The airhead snorted. Favonius snorted. No, not of course. He means Eros, Nico's voice said as it. Cupid in Latin. Favonius smiled. Very good, Nico the Anglo. I'm glad to see you again, by the way. By the way, it's been a long time. Nico knitted his eyebrows. I've never met you. You've never seen me, the god corrected, but I've been watching you. When you came here as a small boy and several times since, I know eventually you will return to look upon my master's face. Nico turned even paler than usual. His eyes darted around the cavernous room. They were starting to feel trapped. Nico, Jason said. What's he talking about? I don't know. Nothing. Nothing, Favonius cried. The one you care for most plunged into the TARDIS, and still you would not allow the truth. Suddenly Jason felt like he was eavesdropping. The one you care for most. You remember what Piper had told him about Nico's crush on Annabeth? Apparently Nico's feelings went way deeper than simple crush. We've only come for Diocletian's scepter, Nico said, clearly anxious to change the subject. Where is it? Fatal just nodded sadly. You thought it would be as easy as facing Diocletian's ghost? I'm afraid not, Nico. Your trials will be much more difficult, you know. Long before this was Diocletian's palace. It was a gateway to my master's court. I've dwelt here for aeons, bringing those who sought love in the presence of Cupid. Listen to the mentions of the difficult trials. He didn't trust this weird god with the hoop and wings of the basket fruit, but an old story surfaced in his mind. Something he'd heard at Camp Jupiter, like, Psyche, Cupid's wife. You carried her to his palace. Favourite's eyes twinkled. Very good, Jason Grace. From this exact spot, I carried Psyche on the winds and brought her to the chambers of my master. In fact, that is why Dioclety built his palace here. This place has always been graced by the gentle west wind. He spread his arm. It is a spot of tranquility and love in a turbulent world. When Diocletian's palace was ransacked, you took the scepter, Jason guessed. For safekeeping, Favorinus agreed. It is one of your Cupid's many treasures. A reminder of better times if you want it. Favorinus turned to Nico. You must face the god of love. Nico stared at sunlight coming through the window, as if wishing he could escape through those narrow openings. Jason wasn't sure what Favorinus wanted, but if facing the god of love meant forcing Nico into some sort of confession about which girl he liked, that didn't seem so bad. Nico, you can do this, Jason said. It might be embarrassing, but it's for the scepter. Nico didn't look convinced. In fact, he looked like he was going to be sick, but he squared his shoulders and nodded. You're right. I'm not afraid of a love god. Favorinus beamed. Excellent. Would you like a snack before you go? He plucked a green apple from his basket and frowned at it. Oh, blast, I keep forgetting my symbol. It's a basket of unripe fruit. Which doesn't Spring Wind get more credit? Summer has all the fun. That's okay, Nico said quickly. But just take us to Cupid. Favorinus spun the hoop on his finger and Jason's body dissolved into air. Chapter 36, Jason. Jason had ridden the wind many times. Being the wind was not the same. He felt out of control. His thoughts scattered, no boundaries between his body and the rest of the world. He wondered if this was how monsters felt when they were defeated, bursting into dust, helpless and formless. Jason could sense Nico's presence nearby. The west wind carried them into the sky above Split. Together they raced above the hills past Roman aqueducts, highways, and vineyards. As they approached the mountains, Jason saw the ruins of a Roman town spread out in a valley below. Crumbling walls, square fountains, and crackled roads, all overgrown with grass. So it looked like a giant mossy game board. It looked like a giant mossy game board. Favorinus set them down in the middle of ruins next to a broken column the size of redwood. Jason's body reformed for a moment. It felt even worse than being the wind, and he'd suddenly been wrapped in a lead overcoat. Yes, mortal bodies are terribly bulky, Favorinus said, as if reading his thoughts. The windbird settled on a nearby wall with his basket of fruit and his russet wings in the sun. Honestly, I don't know how you stand it day in, day out. They stand their surroundings. The town must have been huge once. You could make out the shells of temples and bathhouses and half-buried amphitheatres and empty pedestals. That must have once held statues. Rows of columns marched off to nowhere. The old city's walls weaved in and out of the hillside like stone thread, like stone thread through a green cloth. Some areas looked like they'd been excavated, but most of the city just seemed abandoned, as if it had been left to the elements for the last 2,000 years. For the last 2,000 years. Welcome to Salona, Favorinus said, capital of Dalmatia, birthplace of Dioclety, But long before that, it was the home of Cupid. The name echoed as if the voice was whispering it through the ruins. Something about this place seemed even creepier than the palace basement in Split. Jason had never thought much about Cupid. He certainly never thought about Cupid as scary. Even from Roman demigods, the name conjured up an image of silly winged babies with a toy bow and arrow flying around in his diapers on Valentine's Day. Oh, he's not like that, said Favorinus. Jason flinched. You can read my mind? I don't need to raise him, tossed his bomb hoop into the air. Everyone has the wrong impression of Cupid until they meet him. Nico braced himself against the column. His legs trembled visibly. Hey man! Jason stepped towards him. Nico waved him off. At Nico's feet, the grass turned brown and wilted. The dead patch spread outwards as if the poison was seeping the soles of his shoes. Ah, Favorinus nodded sympathetically. I don't blame you for being nervous, Nico the Anglo. Do you know how I ended up serving Cupid? I don't serve anyone, Nico muttered, especially not Cupid. Favorinus continued as if he hadn't heard. I fell in love with a mortal named Hyacinthus. He was quite extraordinary. Jason's brain was still fussing from the wind trip, so it took him a second to process that. Oh, yes, Jason grinned. Favorinus asked Nico, I fell in love with a dude. Does that shock you? Honestly, Jason wasn't sure. He tried not to think about the details of godly lives, no matter who they fell in love with. After all, his dad Jupiter wasn't exactly a model of good behaviour compared to some of the Olympian love scandals he'd heard about. The West Wind falling in love with a mortal guy didn't seem very shocking. I guess not. So Cupid struck you with his arrow and you fell in love. Favorinus thoughted. Make it sound so simple. Alas, love is never simple, you see. The god of Apollo also liked Hyacinthus. He claimed they were just friends, I don't know, but one day I came across them together playing a game of quiet. There was that weird word again, quiet. Quiet. A game with those hoops, Nico explained, though his voice was brittle like horseshoes. Sort of, Favorinus said. At any rate, I was jealous. Instead of comforting them and finding out the truth, I shifted the wind and sent a heavy metal ring right at Hyacinthus' head, and well, the wind god sighed as if, as Hyacinthus died, Apollo turned him into a flower, the hyacinth. I'm sure Apollo would have taken horrible vengeance of me, but Cupid offered me his protection. I'd done a terrible thing, but I'd been driven mad by love, so he spared me on the conditions that I worked for him forever. Cupid? The name echoed through the ruins again. That would be my cue, Favorinus stood. Think long and hard about how you proceed, Nico the Anglo. You cannot lie to Cupid. If you let your anger rule you, well, your fate will be even sadder than mine. Jason felt like his brain was turning back into the wind. He didn't understand what Favorinus was talking about, or why Nico seemed so shaken, but he had no time to think about it. The wind god disappeared in this world of red and gold. The summer air suddenly felt oppressive. The ground shook and Jason and Nico drew their swords. So the voice rushed past Jason's ear like a bullet. When he turned, no one was there. You come to claim the scepter. Nico stood at their back, and for once Jason was glad to have the guy's company. Cupid, Jason called. Where are you? The voice laughed. It definitely didn't sound like a cute baby angel's. It was like a deep and rich, but also threatening, like a tremor before a major earthquake. Where you least expect me, Cupid answers. As love always is. Something slammed into Jason and hurled him across the street. He toppled down a set of steps and sprawled on the floor of an excavated Roman basement. I wouldn't think you know better, Jason. Grace Cupid's voice roared around him. You found true love after all. Or do you still doubt yourself? Nico scrambled down the steps. You okay? Jason accepted his hand and got to his feet. Yeah, just sucker punched. Or do you expect me to play fair? Cupid laughed. I am the god of love. I am never fair. This time, Jason's senses were on high alert. He felt the air ripple just as the arrow materialized, racing towards Nico's chest. Jason intercepted with his sword and deflected it sideways. The arrow exploding against the nearest wall, peppering them with limestone shrapnel. They ran up the stairs. Jason pulled Nico to one side, and another gust of wind toppled a column that would have crushed him flat. Is this guy love or death? Jason growled. Ask your friends, Cupid said. Frank, Hazel, and Percy met my counterpart, Thanatos. We are not so different, except death is sometimes kinder. We just want the scepter, Nico shouted. We're trying to stop Gaia. Are you on the god side or not? A second arrow hit the ground between Nico's feet and glowed white hot. Nico stumbled back as the arrow burst into a gas of flame. Love is on every side, Cupid said, and no one side. Don't ask what love can do for you. Great, Jason said. Now he's sprouting greeting card messages. Movement behind him. Jason spun, slicing his sword through the air. His blade bit into something solid. He heard a grunt and he swung again, but the invisible god was gone. On the paving stones, a trail of OLYMPUS shimmered the blood of the gods. Very good, Jason said. Cupid said. At least you can sense my presence. Even a glance hit at true love is more than heroes manage. So now I get scepter, Jason asked. Cupid laughed. Unfortunately, you could not wield it. Only a child of the underworld can summon dead legions, and only an officer of Rome can lead them. But Jason waved his hand. He wasn't an officer. He was a praetor. They remembered him in all his second thoughts about where he belonged. In New Rome, he'd offered to give up his position to Percy Jackson. Did that make him unworthy to lead a legion of Roman ghosts? He decided to face that problem when the time came. Just leave that to us, he said. Nico can summon. The third arrow zipped by Jason's shoulder. He couldn't stop it in time. Nico gasped as it sank into his sword arm. Nico! The son of Hades stumbled. The arrow dissolved, leaving no blood and no visible wound, but Nico's face was tight with rage and pain. Enough games! Nico shouted. Show yourself! It is a costly thing, that Cupid said, looking on the true face of love. Another column toppled. Jason scrambled out of its way. My wife Pysa learned that lesson, Cupid said. She was brought here aeons ago when this was the site of my palace. We met only in the dark. She warned never to look upon me, and yet she could not stand the mystery. She feared I was a monster. One night, she lit a candle and beheld my face as I slept. What is that ugly? Jason thought. He had zero in on Cupid's voice. At the edge of amphitheater, not 20 yards away, but he wanted to make sure the god laughed. I was too handsome, I'm afraid. Mortal cannot gaze upon the true appearance of a god without suffering consequences. My mother Aphrodite cursed Pysa for her distrust. Consequences. My mother Aphrodite cursed Pysa for her distrust. My poor lover was tormented, forced into exile, given given a horrible task to prove her worth. He was even sent to the underworld on a quest to show her dedication. She earned her way back to my side, but he suffered greatly. Now I've got you, Jason thought. He thrust his sword into the sky, and thunder shook the valley. Lightning blasted the crater where the voice had been speaking. Silence, Jason was thinking. Dang, it actually worked when an invisible force knocked him to the ground. His sword skidded across the road. A good try, Cupid said. His voice already distant, but love cannot be pinned down so easily. Next to him, a wall collapsed. Jason barely managed to roll aside. Stop it, Nico yelled. It's me you want. Leave him alone. Jason's ears rang. He was dizzy from getting smacked around. His mouth tasted like limestone dust, but he didn't understand why Nico would think of himself as the main target, or Cupid seemed to agree. Poor Nico D'Angelo! The god's voice was tinged with disappointment. Do you know what you want? Much less what I want. My beloved Pisces will risk everything in the name of love. It was the only way to atone for her lack of faith. And you, what have you risked in my name? I've been to Tartarus and back, Nico sighed. You don't scare me. I scare you very, very much. Face me, be honest. Jason pulled himself. All around Nico the ground shifted. The grass withered and the stone crackled, as if something was moving in the earth beneath, trying to push its way through. Give us Dioclety and scepter, Nico said. We don't have time for games. Games, Cupid struck, slapping Nico sideways into a granite pedestal. Love is no game. It is no flowery softness. It is hard work. A quest that never ends. It demands everything from you, especially the truth. And then does it yield rewards? Jason retrieved his sword. If this invisible guy was love, Jason was beginning to think love was overrated. He liked Piper's rose and read her considerate, kind, beautiful, and thug, and enforced, and enforcer. Nico, he called. What does this guy want from you? Tell him, Nico D'Angelo, Cupid said. Tell him you are a coward, afraid of yourself and your feelings. Tell him the real reason you ran away from Camp Half-Blood and why you are always alone. Nico let her loose a guttural scream. The ground at his feet split open, and skeletons crawled forth. Dead Romans with missing hands and carved into skulls, cracked ribs and jaws unhinged. Someone dressed in the remains of togas. Others had glinting pieces of armor hanging off their chests. Will you hide among the dead, as you always do? Cupid haunted. Waves of darkness rolled off the son of Hades. When they hit Jason, they almost lost conscious, overwhelmed by hatred and fear and shame. Images flared through his mind. He saw Nico and his sister on a snow cliff in Maine. Percy Jackson protecting them from a snowy cliff in Maine. Percy Jackson protected them from a manticore. Percy swore gleaming in the dark. He'd be the first demigod Nico had ever seen in action. Later at Camp Half-Blood, Percy took Nico by the arm, promising to keep his sister Bianca safe. But Nico had believed him. Nico had looked in the secret eyes and thought, how could he possibly fail? This is a real hero. He was Nico's favourite game. My Thundermuck had brought to life. Jason saw the moment when Percy returned and told Nico that Bianca was dead. Nico had screamed and called him a liar. He felt betrayed, but still, when the skeleton warriors attacked, he couldn't let them harm Percy. Nico had called on the earth to swallow them up, and then he'd run away, terrified of his own powers and his own emotions. Jason saw a dozen more scenes like this from Nico's point of view, and they left him stunned, unable to move or speak. Meanwhile, Nico's Roman skeleton surged forward and grappled with some invisible. The god struggled, flinging the dead aside, breaking off his ribs and skulls. but the skeletons kept coming, pinning the god's arms. Interesting, Cupid said. Do you have the strength of all? I left him half because of love, Nico said. And Annabeth, she still hiding, Cupid said, smashing our skeleton to pieces. You do not have the strength. Nico, Jason managed to say. It's okay, I get it. Nico glanced over pain and misery washing over his face. No, you don't, he said. There's no way you can understand. And so you run away, Cupid cheated, from your friends, from yourself. I don't have friends, Nico yelled. I left Camp Halford because I don't belong. I never belong. The skeletons had Cupid pinned now. But the invisible god laughed so cruelly that Jason wanted to summon another bolt of lightning. Unfortunately, he doubted he had the strength. Leave him alone, Cupid, Jason croaked. This isn't. His voice failed. He wanted to say it wasn't Cupid's business, but he realized that this was exactly Cupid's business. Something faint and kept buzzing in his ears. Are you shocked? The story of Percy finally made sense to him. Why a mortal girl would be so afraid? Why she would risk breaking the rules to the god of love in the face? Because she feared he might be a monster. Percy had been right. Cupid was a monster. Love was the most savage monster of all. Nico's voice was like broken glass. I wasn't in love with Annabeth. You were jealous of her, Jason said. That's why you didn't want to be around her, especially why you didn't want to be around him. It makes total sense. All the dead knells seemed to go out of Nico at once. The darkness subsided. The Roman dead collapsed into bones and crumbled to dust. I hated myself, Nico said. I hated Percy Jackson. Cupid became visible, a lean, muscular young man with snow white wings, straight black hair, and simple white frock and jeans. The bow and quiver slung over his shoulder. Over his shoulder were no toys. They were weapons of war. His eyes were as red as blood, as every valentine in the world had been squeezed dry. Distilled in one of the poisonous mixtures. His face was handsome but also harsh, as difficult to look as a spotlight. He watched Nico with satisfaction, as if he'd identified the exact spot for his next arrow to make a clean kill. I had a crush on Percy, Nico spat. That's the truth. That's the big secret. He glared at Cupid. Happy now? For the first time, Cupid's gaze seemed sympathetic. I wouldn't say love always makes you happy. His voice sounded smaller, much more human. Sometimes it makes you incredibly sad. But at least you face it now. That's the only way to conquer me. Cupid dissolved into the wind. On the ground where he stood on an ivory staff 3 feet long, toppled with dark globe and polished marble around the side of a baseball of 3 gold Roman eagles, the scepter of Dioclety. Nico knelt and picked it up. He regarded Jason as if waiting for an attack. If the others found out, Jason, you'd have the many more people to back you up and to unleash the fury of the gods on anybody who gives you trouble. Nico scowled. Jason felt the resentments of anger rippling off him. But it's your call, Jason added. Your decision to share or not. I can only tell you. I don't feel that way anymore. Nico, I don't feel that way anymore, Nico. But I mean, I gave up on Percy. I was young and impressive. I don't. His voice crackled, and Jason could tell the guy was about to get tear-eyed. Teary-eyed. Whether Nico had really given up on Percy or not, Jason could imagine what it had been like for Nico. All those years keeping a secret that would have been unthinkable to share the 1940s, denying who he was, feeling completely alone, even more isolated than other demigods. Nico, he said gently, I've seen a lot of brave things, but what you just did, that was maybe the bravest. Nico looked up uncertainly. We should get back to the ship. Yeah, I can fly us. No, Nico announced. This time we're shadow travelling. I've had enough of the winds for a while. Chapter 37, Annabeth. Losing her sight had been bad enough. Being isolated from Percy had been horrible. But now she could see again, watching him die slowly from Gorgon's blood poison, and being unable to do anything about it, that was the worst curse of all. Bob slung Percy over his shoulders like a bag of sports equipment, while the skeleton kitten small Bob curled up on Percy's back and purred. Bob lumbered along at a fast pace, even for a title which made it almost possible for Annabeth to keep up. Her lungs rattled. His skin had started to blister again. She probably needed another drink of fire water, but they left the rear Phlegethon behind. Her body was so sore and battered that she forgot what it was like not to be in pain. How much longer she wheezed? Almost too long, Bob called back. Maybe not. Very helpful, Annabeth thought, but she was too winded to say it. The landscape changed again. They were still going downhill, which should have made travelling easier. But the ground sloped at just the wrong angle. It was too steep to jog, too treacherous to let her guard down, even for a moment. The surface was sometimes loose gravel, sometimes patches of slime. Annabeth stepped around a random bristle sharp enough to impale her foot, and clusters of, well, not rocks exactly, more like warts the size of watermelons. If Annabeth had to guess, and she didn't want to, the supposed Bob was leading her down the length of the Tarvis's large ensign. The air got thicker and stank of sewage. The darkness maybe wasn't quite as intense, but you could only see Bob because of the glint of his white hair and the point of his spear. She hadn't noticed he had reacted to the spearhead on his room since their fight with the air ray. That didn't reassure her. Percy flopped around, causing the kitten to readjust the nest in the small of Percy's back. Occasionally, Percy would groan in pain, and Annabeth felt like a fist was squeezing at her heart. She flashed back to a tea party with Piper, Hazel, and Aphrodite in Charleston. God, that seemed so long ago. Aphrodite had sighed and waved nostalgic about the good old days in the Civil War. How love and war always went hand in hand. Aphrodite had gestured proudly to Annabeth, using her as an example for the other girls. I once promised to make her life interesting, and didn't I? Annabeth had wanted to throttle the goddess of love. She'd had more than her chance of interesting. Now Annabeth was holding it out for a happy ending. Surely that was possible, no matter what the legends had said about tragic heroes. There had to be exceptions, right? If suffering led to reward, then Percy and she deserved the grand prize. She thought about Percy's daydream of New Rome, the two of them settling down, going to college together. At first, the idea of living among the Romans had appalled her. She had resented them for taking Percy away from her. Now she would accept that offer gladly. If only they survived this. If only Rena had got her message. If only a million other long shots paid off. Stop it, she chided herself. She had to concentrate on the present, putting one foot in front of the other, taking this downhill intestinal hike, one giant wart at a time. Her knees felt warm and wobbly, like wire hangers bent to the point of snapping. Percy groaned and muttered something she couldn't make out. Bob stopped suddenly. Look! Ahead in the gloom, the terrain levelled out. Black into a black swamp. Sulphur yellow mist hung in the air, even without sunlight. They were actual plants, clumps of reeds, scrawny leafless trees. Even a few sickly-looking flowers bloomed in the muck. Mossy trails wound between bubbling tar pits. Directly in front of them, Annabeth sunk into the bog, were footprints the size of trash can lids with long pointed toes. Sadly, Annabeth was pretty sure she knew what had made them. Dracon. Yes, Bob grinned at her. That is good. Why? Because we are close. Bob marched into the swamp. Annabeth wanted to scream. She hated being at the mercy of a titan, especially the one who was slowly recovering his memory and bringing them to see a good giant. She hated falling into a swamp that was obviously the stomping ground of a Draken. But Bob had Percy. If she hesitated, she would lose them in the dark. She hurried after them, hopping from moss patch to moss patch and praying to Athena that she didn't fall in a sinkhole. At least the terrain forced Bob to go slowly. Once Annabeth caught up, she could walk right behind him and keep an eye on Percy, who was muttering deliriously, his forehead dangerously hot. Several times he mumbled Annabeth and she fought back a sob. The kitten just purred louder and snuggled up. Finally, the yellow mist parted, revealing a muddy clearing like an island in the muck. The ground was dotted with stunted trees and wart mounds. In the centre loomed a little hike, one giant wart at a time. Her knees felt warm and wobbly, like wire hangers bent to the point of snapping. Percy groaned and muttered something she couldn't make out. Bob stopped suddenly. Look! Ahead in the gloom, the terrain levelled out. Black into a black swamp. Sulphur yellow mist hung in the air, even without sunlight. They were actual plants, clumps of reeds, scrawny leafless trees. Even a few sickly-looking flowers bloomed in the muck. Mossy trails wound between bubbling tar pits. Directly in front of them, Annabeth sunk into the bog, were footprints the size of trash can lids with long pointed toes. Sadly, Annabeth was pretty sure she knew what had made them. Dracon. Yes, Bob grinned at her. That is good. Why? Because we are close. Bob marched into the swamp. Annabeth wanted to scream. She hated being at the mercy of a titan, especially the one who was slowly recovering his memory and bringing them to see a good giant. She hated falling into a swamp that was obviously the stomping ground of a Draken. But Bob had Percy. If she hesitated, she would lose them in the dark. She hurried after them, hopping from moss patch to moss patch and praying to Athena that she didn't fall in a sinkhole. At least the terror forced Bob to go slowly. Once Annabeth caught up, she could walk right behind him and keep an eye on Percy, who was muttering deliriously, his forehead dangerously hot. Several times he mumbled Annabeth and she fought back a sob. The kitten just purred louder and snuggled up. Finally, the yellow mist parted, revealing a muddy clearing like an island in the muck. The ground was dotted with stunted trees and wart mounds. In the centre loomed a large domed hut made of bones and greenish leather. Smoke rose from a hole in the top. The entrance was covered with curtains of scaly reptile skin, and flanking the entrance, 2 torches made from colossal femur bones burned bright yellow. What really caught Annabeth's attention was the Draken skull. 50 yards into the clearing, about halfway to a hut, a massive oak tree jutted from the ground at a 45-degree angle. The jaws of a Draken skull encircled the trunk as if the oak tree were the dead monster's tongues. "Yes," Bob murmured, "this is very good." Nothing about this place felt good to Annabeth. Before she could protest, small Bob arched his way back and hissed. But behind them a mighty roar echoed through the swamp, a sound Annabeth had last heard in the Battle of Manhattan. She turned and saw the Draken charging towards them.